Welcome to No More Excuses. Emotional eating is an unhealthy behavior in which a person eats without self-control or to deal with an emotion. It can be hard to control, but if you take steps to change the patterns that lead you to overeat, you can break the cycle of emotional eating. Among the first steps is creating a plan. It can also help to keep a journal, so you can write about what triggers your emotional eating. In this video, we will discuss what emotional eating is, what symptoms are associated with it, and the risk factors. We will also discuss recognizing if someone is exhibiting signs of emotional eating. If you like the content, please support the channel by liking and subscribing. Now let's dive into the video. What is emotional eating? Emotional eating is an unhealthy behavior in which a person eats without self-control or to deal with an emotion. Emotional eating is a common phenomenon many of us have experienced at one point in our lives. Whether we are watching a romantic comedy or an old movie or snacking on chips and dip at a football game, it's common for us to eat when we're upset or sad. You can start by keeping a food and mood diary to prevent emotional eating. Write down the type of food you eat and the events that upset you. Emotional eating often begins with negative thoughts and can result in binging. Eating to satisfy these thoughts is not beneficial to your body and should be treated by a mental health professional. This type of behavior has adverse effects on your mental health and is a sign of deeper issues. Once you identify the underlying causes and work through them, you can take action to overcome emotional eating. An emotional eating disorder can lead to serious health problems and can be highly debilitating. This condition is characterized by cravings for sugary, high-carbohydrate foods. Those suffering from this disorder lack control over their eating habits and often feel guilty once they've finished eating. How do I know if I'm an emotional eater? One of the biggest reasons why people overeat is because of emotional reasons. They experience feelings of sadness, anxiety, or boredom and use food as a way to escape those feelings. Emotional eating is different from true hunger, which is a feeling of being physically hungry. Emotional eating often occurs at odd hours of the day and is not always triggered by physical desire. The signs of emotional eating are not always easy to recognize. Emotional eaters tend to reach for comfort foods associated with happiness. Once you have identified whether you are an emotional eater, you can start working to prevent it. Emotional eating differs from binge eating, so it's important to distinguish between the two. This pattern of eating can be harmful to your health and to your self-esteem. They often eat quickly and often do so to distract themselves from the emotional situation. What emotions are associated with eating? Several studies have investigated the relationship between eating and negative emotions, such as frustration, anger, and sadness. Researchers have found that many of these emotions are accompanied by an appetite. The Emotional Appetite Questionnaire, EMAQ, includes 22 items measuring eating responses to positive and negative emotions. The EMAC scores can be summed to determine whether a person's eating behavior relates to a specific emotion or situation. Emotional eating is common in humans, and often involves turning to food in times of stress. However, food is often associated with positive feelings as well. For example, sharing a sweet treat with a loved one on Valentine's Day or a holiday feast can be associated with a positive mood. Even children develop emotional eating patterns. If a parent gives a child a cookie to cheer her up when crying, she may subconsciously link cookies with comfort. The researchers analyzed the participants' responses to the survey items based on the number of occasions on which they reported a particular emotion. They also examined the response combinations that included positive and negative feelings and responses that expressed apathetic feelings. Risk factors for emotional eating. Risk factors for emotional eating include BMI, household income, and childhood or adult trauma. Other risk factors include psychological factors such as depressive symptoms and psychopathological experiences. Children with emotional abuse are particularly likely to engage in emotional eating. Environmental and socioeconomic conditions are also necessary. However, these factors do not necessarily predict emotional eating in adults. Psychotropic medication may be necessary if the eating disorder is a psychiatric condition. These drugs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, such as sertraline, Zoloft, and citalopram, Lexapro. Self-help groups such as Overeaters Anonymous may be invaluable resources. Additionally, nutritionists and therapists can provide valuable support and guidance. Chronic stress is another risk factor for emotional eating. Chronic stress may include job, family, or school-related stress. It can also result from exposure to crime or abuse. If these factors persist, the risk of developing emotional eating is high. Difference between physical and emotional hunger. There is a difference between emotional and physical hunger. Subscribe to the channel and like the video. It will help the channel grow. Thanks. Emotional hunger is a more intense experience and usually comes on suddenly. It's often associated with upsetting emotions and causes you to eat immediately to alleviate your emotional pain. On the other hand, physical hunger is a more gradual process that gives you progressive clues. It can lead you to different types of food. Emotional hunger is often misunderstood and may be difficult to distinguish from physical hunger. Unlike physical hunger, emotional hunger hits suddenly, is more intense and is accompanied by feelings of shame and guilt. In contrast to emotional hunger, physical hunger does not involve a craving for a particular food and goes away once you've satisfied your body's physical requirements. Unlike physical hunger, emotional hunger can be satisfied by other methods, such as social relationships, physical activity, career, spiritual practices, and purpose. The difference between physical and emotional hunger is essential. It's important to remember that emotional hunger is different from physical hunger because emotional hunger often leads to regret and guilt. In contrast, physical hunger can be satisfied by eating even if you don't feel full. Emotional hunger is a more intense feeling that's triggered by specific tastes and textures. It can also make you feel lightheaded or faint. Identify your triggers. If you want to break the cycle of emotional eating, it is important to understand your triggers. Your triggers are a series of feelings or situations that you associate with food. They may be positive or negative, or they may be associated with emptiness. Understanding your triggers and how to respond to them helps to keep a food and mood diary. This will help you find sustainable solutions to your problem. You should also learn about the negative feelings you associate with emotional eating. You may find that binge eating is linked to feelings of sadness or anxiety. Once you understand this connection, you can work on coping strategies. Instead of reaching for comfort foods, find activities or people that make you feel better. Tips for avoiding emotional eating. While you may not know what triggers emotional eating, you can avoid it by following a few tips. Avoiding emotional eating starts with understanding the reason why you feel the way you do. Emotional eating is often a symptom of a larger issue, such as stress or depression. When you can't control your emotions, you feel like you have no other choice but to turn to food. But there are several tips you can use to avoid emotional eating. Remember that life is not about perfection. We all make mistakes and it's okay to admit them. Acknowledging them and moving on is one of the best tips for avoiding emotional eating. Another tip is to avoid feeling guilty or ashamed when you make poor food choices. Instead, try to make small changes to your eating habits over time. Emotional eating is often caused by larger issues like chronic stress, anger, depression, and other problems. Emotional eating typically stems from feelings of powerlessness. In such cases, counseling, stress management, exercise, and other techniques can help you deal with the underlying cause. You can try to control your emotions through food by using your rating system and not letting yourself become emotionally attached to the food. You can also keep a diary of your mood and the food that you eat. This way, you can see what triggers you to overeat. If you feel angry or sad, you can use this journal as a guide to help you avoid overeating. You can also keep unhealthy snacks out of your reach. Consistently making healthy choices is essential to maintaining overall health and well-being. Avoid feeling guilty or shame when you do make poor choices. Even small, positive changes in your eating habits will have a cumulative effect. The key is identifying the cause of emotional eating and finding ways to cope with it.